Apologies, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I do have a supplementary. Does the leader not agree that Sir Ray would have expected robust scrutiny of this event? And as this was an invitation-only event that excluded members of the public, can the leader of the council explain how the expenditure of £15,277.58 of public money was considered to be in the best interests of the residents? I would also add that the 2018 event was not a finger buffet, it was indeed a three-course meal in the Middlesex Suite here at the Civic Centre.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the supplementary, and I stand corrected on that answer. I believe with regards to scrutiny, that is being shown here. I think the question needs to be asked is if Councillor Curling is so alert to this issue, why he hasn't taken previous opportunities to raise it. I imagine the only reason he's doing it now is not because he is concerned, it's because other people have expressed their concern directly to him and woken him up to an issue that previously he has ignored. So when it comes to scrutiny, I welcome it. I have explained, I have justified the reason for doing so, and if any member believes that Sir Ray was not welcomed and entitled to that civic dinner, I would be delighted to hear that position and their justification for declining that honour to Sir Ray and Jean Palmer. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Moving on to question number 7.7 on the order paper. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the Cabinet member please provide an update in respect to the ongoing disruption to buses and rail passengers at West Drayton Station, caused by the action or inaction of Network Rail, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Higgins, for your question. Members may or may not be aware that the entirety of station approach at West Drayton Station is owned by Network Rail. It's important to clarify that issue, as otherwise there's a risk of confusion and mixed messages if people were to wrongly assume that the road and the root of all its problems somehow sit with the council. A package of improvements outside the station buildings was originally agreed within the scope of something called the Crossrail Improvement Programme, money for which came from the government via Transport for London, who made it available to all those London boroughs which would have stations on the new Crossrail Elizabeth line running through them. This also applied in cases such as this one, where the highway concerned is not in the ownership of the local authority. Needless to say, whilst the money came from TfL to the council, Network Rail still owns all the land involved and so have been crucial to what has proved to be a series of painfully protracted approvals and agreements for the work to be done, irrespective of who would be involved in actually carrying it out. Colleagues will, I hope, be relieved, and you, Councillor Higgins, will, I hope, be relieved to know that thanks to the determination of this administration and the relentless chasing by our officer team, and importantly, the assistance of the new MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, there has finally been some progress. A major part of the work to improve the forecourt, namely a large area between the main entrance of the new station building and the adjacent Grand Union Canal, started on site shortly before Christmas, and I can report that good progress is now being made. This element of the work, being undertaken by the council's contractor and overseen by the council's engineering team, only came to fruition after all the detailed design work by the council's own team and specialist consultants was finally approved by Network Rail in November. Thankfully, that portion of station approach is now on target for completion by the end of March. That at least is reasonably positive news, albeit it's taken far longer to have got to this point than any of us would have preferred. For the avoidance of doubt, I'd like to stress that the delays have not been down to the council or its agents. I even wrote to the Chief Executive of Network Rail to seek his intervention and assurance, and have been sent a copy of a letter sent to the Secretary of State for Transport by Steve Tuckwell MP, asking for government intervention to push the process forward. However, as many of you will be aware, significant problems remain regarding the roadway element of station approach, and unfortunately, until this is addressed, the impact on buses and rail passengers will remain. The key problem is the partial collapse of a deep buried Thames water sewer, which runs directly under the section of Station Road that leads out through what is a fairly narrow gap between the adjacent buildings onto Useley High Street. The collapsed sewer has required further investigation by Network Rail and their own specialists, and as previously mentioned, the Council as well as the local MP have been chasing for action in this regard, because we are all concerned at the impact of failing to get this work started, let alone finished. And I should add here that Network Rail originally promised that the surveys and all the necessary build-up work would be finished by the end of October, and we are still waiting for them to conclude this work, although I do believe the survey has now been completed, albeit we haven't seen the results. Now, I know, so we are still waiting that outcome. The resolution of that remains, as it always has been, firmly in the hands of Network Rail rather than the Council, although, as we have told them all the way through, we are ready, willing and able to help unstick the process if and where we can. We understand from Network Rail as recently as this month that they are finally planning to conclude their investigations, and that work needed as a consequence is being given their highest priority for funding and action. But we still do not have sight of that programme. Only a few days ago, we heard from our Network Rail contacts that the timetable to complete these works may stretch as far ahead as July. Network Rail acknowledged the unfortunate impact of this much delayed work on the many residents and travelling public, especially people who rely on TfL buses which serve West Drayton Station. But this acknowledgement is of little help to those who use this station every day. What we and they need is action, not words. We are not alone in being frustrated by the slow pace of action by Network Rail. TfL, London Buses and the bus operators are, for once, all of the same opinion as the Council. Mr Mayor, I am as frustrated as all councillors that we do not have a firm date for this final part of the project. But I, along with the local MP, Councillor Steve Tuckwell, continue to press for this at the highest possible level.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. Councillor Higgins, do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 8, motions. Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to start with a disclaimer. This motion is neither an attempt to get lessons or pointers in asset management, nor any lecture in financial prudence. So to those who are gearing up with instructive, condescending speeches, I would say, no thank you. This motion is being moved simply to seek commitment from the administration that the Council owned locally and nationally listed assets, over 700 in number, would remain under the Council ownership preserved for the coming generations. The Council shouldn't have to sell listed assets, but with coffers running dangerously low and Hillingdon faring 31st out of the 33 London boroughs in terms of absolute level of reserves, it seems like a rather desperate situation. Therefore, I would rather they commit and put on record that no such moves would be made, and that all efforts would be put to bring them back to life and back into use, like it has been done with the Cranford House and Stables or Battle of Britain bunker. This Council gloats about financial efficiency, while its current mid-term financial forecast strategy, in its own words, depends on the achievement of asset sales with circa £75 million assumed over the next 5 years, and these providing the financing towards the Council's transformation programme and DSG safety valve agreement requirements. Another favoured term seems to be surplus to requirements, hence disposable. While disposing of assets is their last-ditch effort to balance the books, and some assets may well need to be disposed of for capital receipts, but these assets should not ever be the buildings on the local or heritage list. It is only natural for us to be concerned, because if the council has been able to bypass a covenant on Useley recreation ground through legal loopholes against the wishes of the residents, then alarm bells must ring over why the council wants to bring Borough Hall return to the council asset work stream for a decision on future use, despite it already being well used for multiple community purposes. It's a huge red flag. The listed buildings, such as Borough Hall, which should be celebrating its centenary next month for its official opening as Hayes Town Hall in February 1924, are heritage assets of local architectural and historic importance, and they make Hillingdon's architecture fabric unique. Heritage buildings like granaries at Knight's Court Farm, listed 17 years ago in 2006, are valuable assets for Hillingdon communities, but are now on Historic England's risk register. These are a pair of early to mid 19th century weatherboard granaries, each with timber frames standing on straddle stones with tiled roofs. These are examples of a once common agricultural building type in Middlesex, but now rare. The northern granary reuses a 18th century 6-panel door and has a queen strut roof with collapsed purlins. The southern granary has now collapsed. They were listed in priority category A, which means immediate risk of further rapid deterioration or loss of fabric. No solution agreed. Similarly, Gatehouse at Hillingdon Uxbridge Cemetery, Uxbridge Road, is a Grade 2 listed building on the risk register. It is mid-19th century gatehouse with Benjamin Ferry. It is in a deteriorating condition and vacant. The wall has partially collapsed. Condition survey has been completed, extent of repairs required agreed, but not yet implemented. Many other properties on risk register are marked as vulnerable or deteriorating significantly. Most of these assets have been with local authorities for decades, and due to utter neglect and sheer lack of fill are likely to get run down so much that they suddenly become unsafe for public or surplus to requirements, and then fall into the trap of being sold out to make up for the money crunch. I move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded by Councillor Davis?
I formally second and reserve my right, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It will not come as a surprise that I speak in opposition to this ill-conceived motion. The Council, in common with other public authorities, needs to continue to review its asset holdings to ensure they are fit for purpose. And the idea that the Council would continue to hold assets, regardless of their use, forever, imposing a financial burden for taxpayers, clearly does not sound like sound financial management to me. Planning policies and relevant legislation aim to concern and enhance the borough's historic landscape. These strongly support the retention of heritage assets and encourage proposals for their preservation, conservation or enhancement. But who owns them isn't entirely relevant to that. The obligation is around the asset, not the ownership, and that's important. Under planning policy, the planning system, a heritage asset can be designated, i.e. Grade 2 or Grade 1 listed, and there are some 430 of these buildings in Hillingdon. We won't own all of them, we don't own many of them. There are in addition some 331 buildings that are listed as having local merit. The protections offered to each are governed by legislation, but in essence, a nationally listed building has greater protection than a local building. But nevertheless, it is still relevant to any planning application, and the Council's planning policies on locally listed buildings apply regardless of ownership, and the local planning authority will individually assess any proposal to alter or redevelop the buildings in accordance with the development plan. And then, indeed, this borough has many successful examples of designated and undesignated heritage assets that have been sensitively redeveloped or approved for development, such as the Randalls building here in Uxbridge, or the recently approved plans for the locally listed Nestle factory, where the historic fabric of the building is being retained following redevelopment. Thank you. I oppose the motion.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak in support of the motion. Hillingdon has a wealth of heritage sites and buildings, from the bunker in Uxbridge to the Queen Anne Southlands building in my own ward. Many of these are under the stewardship and safe custody of our council. All are important as they anchor us to our past and are loved by our residents. The motion before us this evening is asking that Hillingdon Council be a protector of all of the sites in its ownership. So why are we asking this? Is there danger afoot? Afraid so. So we have three flashing juggernauts heading our way. Firstly, Hillingdon's money chest, our reserves, so reduced that we are almost at the bottom of the London League. Secondly, we have the stubbornly high needs deficit of 21 million or so, as Hillingdon is one of the minority of councils which have been forced to apply to government for a bailout, and with any deficit remaining after 2026 needing to be paid out from our reserves, as per the government's statutory overriding rules. Thirdly, we have the worrying direction of travel proposed only last month by the Conservative government's Levelling Up Department, which would allow councils to sell their assets to pay for reserves revenue services. In essence, allowing councils to sell its family silver to stop them from becoming bankrupt. The motion before us would commit our council to be the protector of our inherited heritage sites and buildings, and not squander our rich history in plugging a financial black hole brought about by both Conservative government and Conservative local government policies, austerity from 2010 from central government, financial unwise decisions locally. Selling the family silver, selling off assets to fund day-to-day spending is not best practice, as the Department for Levelling Up states. However, government proposals out for consultation are allowing councils to do just that. But we have a choice this evening to say that Hillingdon will not be selling its family silver by voting for this motion. You secure this promise. Otherwise, our heritage sites are at risk. I support the motion.
Thank you. No other speakers. I'll go back to Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm proud to have seconded this motion because we all heard it here tonight from the Cabinet Member. To summarise, this Conservative administration, with these assets, are putting up a price tag. If they're surplus to requirements, they should be told. And we disagree. They need protection and they need our investment. This motion is about reassurance to our residents that we will protect the history and special character of this borough. This motion is about a moment of calm in a frantic financial environment created by a Conservative administration. As local councillors, we have a role to play in preserving and conserving the very local history created and that has enriched our borough over many years. We have a role to ensure that our decisions respect the gifts of lands and buildings passed down through the generations. We have a number of buildings, of architectural works, noted as significant in our spaces and places around the borough, each requiring protection from current and future councillors. These places help Hillingdon residents feel connected to their community, but residents are concerned. They are concerned that this council will make decisions that get rid of prized community assets or change them, the use of them beyond recognition. There is concern that buildings will be mothballed until unusable and then thrown aside as they are too costly to repair. These prized local buildings bring more than just monetary value because of their aesthetics, their history, their community connection and their beauty. I know that in my own ward, Wood End, the future around Barrow Hall is making residents nervous. They know that it's been seen as surplus to requirements by the council as it no longer is a Sure Start centre, which is a grave loss to our local families. Decisions by this Conservative administration have compounded the cynicism and growing mistrust in democracy and politicians, as residents' wishes have not been listened to. This Conservative administration mirrors this from the government. We see residents of Uxbridge appalled and betrayed by the mishandling of the way they've been asked to give views occasionally on things such as the Uxbridge Library relocation. Residents feel their voices are falling on deaf ears. Mr. Mayor, these significant assets are worth much more to our communities, but this administration sticks to a plan of sell off and sell off quick, because they have no other way of avoiding the big black holes in their finances. Simply put, this motion will enable this council to ensure residents that assets of significant interest, character and conservation will not be disposed of at the highest price. This motion will preserve listed assets from the abandonment by this financially frantic Conservative administration, and I urge them to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sir Winston Churchill once said, "We shape our buildings, afterwards our buildings shape us." Perhaps this is the very sentiment that Councillor Tuckwell, as the Uxbridge and South Ruislip MP, had chosen his first Westminster Hall debate about protecting heritage assets in his constituency. Was it ill-conceived too? Or was it just a farce? If it didn't matter, why did he go looking for money for it to be saved, to be signposted to National Lottery Heritage Fund, etc.? Ironically, when Labour brings a motion like this, as well as saving historic pubs or lobbying government for money to get out of this financial hellhole, it is voted down simply to score political brownie points. Sir Churchill's statement perhaps is a premonition. As some of our heritage buildings are led to collapse, the days of this administration perhaps on the collapse too. For voting for this motion, it will only help cement their intentions, if any, to protect the heritage. Can they show passion, vision, and drive to do the same? I hope they vote with their conscience to save these buildings for posterity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we go to voting. Please. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A recorded vote has been requested and supported by the requisite number of members. I will therefore ask each member, alphabetical order, if you are voting for the motion as moved by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Mathers, against or abstaining. Councillor Banerjee. Councillor Bassett. Councillor Batt. Councillor Bianco. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Burles. Councillor Burrows. Councillor Rita Chamdal. Councillor Roy Chamdal. Councillor Chubadar. Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Curling. Councillor Davies. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dott. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Farley. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gaelic. Councillor Garg. Councillor Gill. Councillor Goddard. Councillor Gohill. Councillor Hagger. Councillor Higgins. Councillor Islam. Councillor Kaur. Councillor Lakhmana. Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Makwana. Councillor Mand. Councillor Mathers. Councillor D. Mills. Councillor R. Mills. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Nelson West. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Punja. Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Singh. Councillor Smallwood. Councillor Sweeting. Councillor Tuckwell. Madam Deputy Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Against.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is lost by 27 votes to 20.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of the meeting. I formally close the meeting.